Have you ever noticed how much of your life has been spent trying to be liked? From the way you dress, the words you choose, the silence you swallow just to avoid conflict. Every smile you force, every approval you chase, every moment you shrink yourself, hoping that someone will finally see you as enough. But here's the haunting truth. Being liked has never saved anyone from loneliness. It has never built kingdoms, written history, or carved legacies into stone. Being liked is soft. It is fleeting, fragile, and cheap. It costs you your authenticity while giving you nothing that lasts. Respect, on the other hand, is different. Respect doesn't beg. It doesn't bend. It doesn't whisper for permission to exist. Respect demands presence, strength, and self-mastery. And the moment you stop obsessing over whether people like you, you begin to awaken the darker, more powerful force within you. The force that cannot be ignored. The force that is remembered. So ask yourself, will you keep living as a shadow in pursuit of being liked? Or will you step into the unshakable light of respect, even if it means walking alone? We live in an age where approval has become a form of survival, and the pursuit of being liked has quietly turned into one of the greatest addictions of modern life. Everywhere you turn, there is a silent demand to conform, to adjust yourself, to make sure you do not stand out in a way that threatens others. Social media amplifies this hunger for validation. Every like, every comment, every fleeting thumbs up becomes a drop of dopamine, a brief reassurance that you belong. But beneath that surface gratification lies a dangerous emptiness, a hollow dependency on what others think. The problem is not that we want to connect, it's that we confuse being liked with being valuable. We begin to mistake approval for meaning. We tell ourselves, if people like me, I matter. Yet the truth is far harsher. Being liked is often nothing more than a reflection of convenience. People like you when you give them comfort, when you echo what they want to hear, when you serve their narrative. But the moment you step out of that mold, the fragile fabric of their approval tears apart, revealing just how shallow their liking really was. Machiavelli once said that it is safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both, but the essence of his thought was not an invitation to cruelty. It was a revelation about the instability of affection compared to the weight of respect. Love and liking are emotions that waver, bend, and evaporate with time, circumstance, or convenience. Respect, however, is anchored in recognition. Recognition of strength, of boundaries, of a presence that cannot be dismissed. The tragedy is that our culture has elevated likability into an idol, teaching us that being agreeable, being pleasant, being easy to digest is the surest path to success. But what is this success worth if it strips you of your spine, if it forces you to silence your truths just so others can feel more comfortable? Respect is harder, slower, and more uncomfortable to build, but it has a permanence that liking will never achieve. People may stop liking you when you refuse to play their games, but if they respect you, they will never forget you. The great misconception around likability is that it brings security, when in fact it often makes you expendable. Think about the people in your life whom you merely like. How quickly can that feeling shift? A minor disagreement, a single moment of discomfort, and suddenly the warmth of liking cools into indifference. Being liked makes you replaceable, because it is based on how well you fit into the shifting moods and desires of others. Respect, however, binds people differently. Even if they do not like you, if they respect you, they cannot ignore you. They remember your presence, your words, your strength of character. And sometimes it is those who do not even like you that end up standing for you in critical moments. Because respect compels acknowledgement, whether affection exists or not. This is why leaders, thinkers, and creators who dared to be authentic are remembered, while those who merely sought to be liked are forgotten. Liking fades, but respect leaves a mark. The psychological cost of chasing approval is profound. When you obsess over being liked, you begin to fracture yourself into pieces, editing your personality depending on who is in the room. Around one group, you soften your voice. Around another, you exaggerate your laughter. You suppress opinions, you shrink ambitions, and you betray your instincts, all to remain acceptable. Over time, this does not simply make you agreeable, it erodes your sense of self. You wake up one day and no longer know who you are, because you have worn so many masks to fit into others' expectations. And still, after all that effort, The approval you earn is fickle. The same people you've bent yourself for can abandon you in an instant, leaving you hollow and bitter. Respect works differently. It demands that you stay rooted in yourself. It does not require masks or performance. And while it may not win you the immediate affection of everyone, it attracts the deeper recognition of those who value integrity over compliance. Philosophers and psychologists have long warned against the seduction of superficial approval. Carl Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, distinct and whole, not a fragment shaped by others' demands. He argued that true wholeness requires facing the shadow within, accepting parts of yourself that others might reject. This stands in direct opposition to the culture of being liked, where we suppress our shadows and polish only the most agreeable aspects of ourselves for display. The irony is that in doing so, we become hollow, and people sense it. They may like the mask, but they cannot respect the person behind it, because the person is absent. Respect grows when we embrace both our light and shadow, when we stand unashamed of our complexity. Machiavelli, Jung, Nietzsche all echoed in different ways the same truth. Authenticity and strength outweigh approval in the shaping of a powerful life. Look at history and you will see that the people who shaped the world were rarely the ones who were universally liked. Socrates was despised by many in Athens, yet his respect endures centuries later. Martin Luther King Jr. was hated and feared by those who clung to injustice, but he earned an enduring respect that reshaped moral consciousness. Even artists, from Van Gogh to Kafka, were not liked in their time, but today they are revered. The lesson is clear. The pursuit of being liked leads to obscurity, while the courage to live with integrity, even against the tide, creates legacy. Being liked might fill the present with applause, but respect transcends time. This is not about fame or notoriety. It is about the undeniable weight of being remembered for standing firm in truth. Respect is a slower burn, but it is eternal compared to the quick flare of being liked. And yet, despite this truth, most people still cling to the safety of likability because it feels easier in the moment. It is less painful to swallow your words than to risk rejection. It is more comfortable to smile and agree than to endure conflict. But what begins as small compromises slowly becomes a way of life. You wake up decades later and realize you have built a house made of approval slips, fragile and temporary, with no foundation of your own. And by then, the respect you could have earned, through courage, through boundaries, through authenticity, has slipped away. Respect is not given to those who simply float with the current. It is granted to those who dare to anchor themselves, even if the waters rage around them. The conflict, then, is not merely external, it is within you. Do you continue feeding the hunger of being liked, or do you choose the harder, lonelier, but ultimately richer path of respect? Think back to the quiet betrayals of yourself. The small moments you thought were insignificant but carried heavy weight in your spirit. The time you said yes to a gathering you didn't want to attend, just so you wouldn't disappoint someone. The time you swallowed your opinion in a meeting because you feared sounding too different. The time you allowed someone to cross your boundaries because saying no felt too heavy, too confrontational. These may seem like ordinary compromises, but they leave scars. Each time you deny yourself to be liked, a part of you erodes. And though the people around you may smile, may nod, may approve, deep inside you know that it wasn't real acceptance. It was the reward for your submission. You gave up your authenticity in exchange for temporary comfort. But temporary comfort always demands a permanent cost. And when you look back at those moments, what remains is not gratitude or connection, but a haunting emptiness, a reminder of how much you abandoned yourself for approval. You've probably also felt the sting of invisibility when you tried to please everyone. You bent yourself into shapes to fit their needs, softened your voice so no one felt threatened, carried their burdens even when yours were heavy. And yet, despite all that effort, people left. They forgot. They moved on. That is the cruel irony. Those you worked so hard to please rarely remember your sacrifices, because to them it was simply convenient. You became background music in their lives, pleasant but forgettable. And deep down, this hurts more than outright rejection, because rejection at least acknowledges your existence, but forgettability erases you altogether. This is the true cost of being liked without being respected. You become easy to discard. And what aches most is not their betrayal, but your realization that you betrayed yourself first by never asking for more. But then there are those other moments, the ones that mark the beginning of a transformation. The first time you said no, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The first time you stood your ground, even as the air in the room grew tense. The first time you realized that protecting your peace mattered more than being agreeable. At first it felt terrifying. Your heart raced. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were being cruel, selfish, or difficult. You expected people to leave, to turn their backs, to withdraw their approval, and some of them did. The silence after your refusal was deafening, but in that silence, something remarkable began to grow. Respect. For the first time, people started to see you differently. They might not have liked your answer, but they recognized your strength. And most importantly, you recognized yourself. When you begin to set boundaries, when you stop chasing the constant applause, something shifts in the air around you. People no longer take your time for granted. They pause before making demands. They consider your presence differently. Not everyone will embrace it. Some will resist because they benefited from your weakness. But the ones who remain, they value you not for what you give up, but for what you stand for. That is the subtle difference between being liked and being respected. Liking is about comfort. Respect is about weight. And once people feel the weight of your presence, they cannot treat you as lightly as before. You carry yourself with a new kind of gravity, one that doesn't beg for attention but commands it silently. And though it may isolate you at times, it also protects you. You've likely seen this difference play out in relationships. Think about the friend who was always agreeable, always available, always bending over backward to keep everyone happy. People liked them, but they were often taken for granted. Now think of the one who spoke the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, who walked away from disrespect, who demanded fairness without apology. People didn't always like them. Sometimes they even resented them, but they could never dismiss them. Their presence lingered, their words carried weight. This is what respect feels like. It is heavier than affection, but it lasts, and often, even those who dislike someone still acknowledge their strength, while those who are only liked fade quickly into irrelevance. Which would you rather be? The person remembered for their spine, or the person forgotten for their silence? Now maybe you've experienced this shift in yourself more than once. There was a time when you played the role of the agreeable one, and it left you drained, unfulfilled, invisible. But then came the awakening, the realization that you didn't need to bend so much. You started making choices for yourself, not for applause. You started drawing lines, protecting your energy, valuing your solitude. And suddenly people treated you differently. Some grew distant, yes, but others drew nearer, not out of pity or convenience, but out of genuine recognition. It is in these moments that you understand the quiet power of respect. It does not give you crowds of admirers, but it attracts the right kind of presence. The few who see you, not just use you. The contrast is clear when you look back. Being liked gave you temporary relief but lasting emptiness, while being respected gave you temporary discomfort but lasting strength. When you sacrificed yourself for approval, you lost both yourself and the respect of others. But when you chose yourself, even at the cost of being disliked, you gained a foundation that could not be shaken. And though the path of respect is lonelier, it is also freer. It is also freer. You no longer have to juggle masks. You no longer fear rejection because you are no longer living for acceptance. You simply exist as yourself, unashamed, unapologetic, undeniable. And that shift, though subtle, changes everything about how you move in the world. It is the difference between begging for a seat at the table and building your own. There comes a moment when you realize that the constant noise of approval has been drowning out your own voice. And in that realization begins the awakening. It is not loud, not dramatic. It begins in silence. You notice how exhausting it has been to keep pretending, how heavy it feels to wear masks every day, how draining it is to twist yourself for acceptance. And in that quiet clarity you feel something shift. The world has always told you that you need others to confirm your worth, but suddenly you see that the only confirmation that matters is your own. This moment is not glamorous. It feels raw, almost lonely, but there is a strange freedom in it. You start to understand that solitude is not emptiness. It is the space where the fragments of your soul begin to gather again, piece by piece, until you are whole. Awakening is rarely about gaining anything external. It is about stripping away. You peel back the layers of expectation, the roles you thought you had to play, the endless apologizing for simply existing. Each layer falls away like old skin, and beneath it you discover something stronger. You see that respect is not something you chase, it is something you embody. You feel it in the way you stand taller, the way you no longer justify every choice, the way silence no longer scares you. Respect grows out of stillness, out of scars, out of the nights you endured alone. You stop craving validation like oxygen, because you realize the fire within you can burn without anyone's permission. That realization is terrifying at first, but it is also the beginning of power. This awakening is not about arrogance. It is not about becoming untouchable or hard. It is about grounding. You learn to exist like a mountain, immovable, unshaken by shifting winds. You realize that storms do not destroy mountains, they only shape them. In the same way, the storms of rejection, misunderstanding, and judgment no longer make you crumble. They refine you. You begin to see scars differently, not as shameful reminders of failure, but as proof that you survived, that you endured what once threatened to break you. Each scar becomes a line of respect etched into your being, silent evidence that you are stronger than the world believes. In that recognition you feel lighter, not because life is easier, but because you are heavier in spirit. The awakening also reveals the emptiness of applause. You start to notice how shallow the clapping hands really sound, how quickly cheers turn into silence, how fragile external approval is, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You realize you no longer want the kind of attention that depends on constant performance. You want something deeper, something that does not vanish when the crowd leaves. This is where respect begins to separate itself from liking in the most profound way. Respect doesn't require you to dance for it, doesn't vanish in silence, doesn't demand that you betray yourself to earn it. Respect lives in the weight of your choices, in the integrity of your actions, in the strength of your presence. When you awaken to this truth, you stop performing, you stop begging, you start living. The solitude of awakening is heavy at first. You will lose people, some will drift away because they no longer recognize the version of you that refuses to bend. Others will resent the boundaries you place because they thrived when you had none. This hurts, but only in the beginning. Over time, the emptiness those people leave behind becomes sacred space. Space where you can breathe, space where you can hear your own thoughts. Space where you can finally grow. And into that space, new people arrive. The ones who do not come for what you sacrifice, but for who you are. They may be fewer, but they are deeper. And through them, you learn that loneliness is not the absence of company. It is the absence of authenticity. Once you are authentic, even solitude feels full. The imagery of light becomes real in awakening, not the blinding light of approval that flickers on and off, but the steady flame of self-recognition. You begin to walk differently, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You notice that silence no longer intimidates you, it comforts you. You can sit alone with your thoughts and not feel hollow. You begin to carry yourself with a quiet dignity, one that does not beg for eyes but commands them naturally. It is in this quiet strength that respect takes root. You do not shout for it, you do not demand it, you simply exist in such a way that people cannot help but acknowledge it, even if they never say it out loud. Respect is not granted by applause. It is carved into the way you move through the world after awakening. And when the awakening fully settles into your bones, you no longer measure yourself by who approves or who stays. You measure yourself by how deeply you remain true to your own spine. You stop trying to shine brighter for others, and instead learn how to burn steadily within yourself. And while the world may still misunderstand you, may still dislike you, you remain rooted, because now you understand. The greatest freedom is not being loved by all. It is standing in respect, even if only with yourself. That is the essence of awakening. It is not an external revolution. It is an inner shift that no one can take from you. Once it happens, you are never the same again. At some point, you must realize that chasing the affection of others is a prison, and the bars are built from your own fear of rejection. Every time you bend yourself for approval, you tighten the chains. But when you finally stop, when you choose to live without apology, something incredible happens. The chains fall silently away. The applause you once chased begins to feel irrelevant. You no longer need to fill the silence with other people's approval because the silence itself becomes your companion. This is the birth of respect. Not the cheap kind bought by flattery, but the kind that emerges when you stand rooted in your truth. And though it may feel like the world shrinks when people leave, what really happens is the opposite. Your world expands. Because for the first time, you are not living for their gaze, you are living for your own soul. That is the hidden revolution, the one that does not announce itself with banners or noise, but whispers within. I am enough, even if no one applauds. Respect does not demand that you be perfect, it demands that you be whole. It is not earned by wearing the mask of likability, but by embracing the authenticity of your entire self, even the parts others may reject. And when you live this way, you begin to see how fragile external validation really is. Approval fades as quickly as it comes, like smoke dispersing in the wind. But respect has weight. It lingers in rooms long after you have left. It changes the way people think about you, even in silence. More importantly, it changes the way you think about yourself. You begin to walk taller, not with arrogance, but with an inner steadiness that cannot be borrowed or stolen. This is what makes respect dangerous to those who thrive on manipulation. It cannot be bought, and it cannot be taken away once rooted within you. And when you hold it, you are no longer a follower of the world's demands. You become a force of your own. Of course, the path to respect is not paved with ease. It will demand that you disappoint people. It will require you to endure misunderstanding, rejection, even resentment. There will be moments when the silence feels suffocating, when you wonder if the cost is too high. But this is where the transformation deepens. Because each time you resist the temptation to fold for approval, you strengthen your spine. Each time you hold to your truth in the face of disapproval, you become unshakable, and eventually something profound occurs. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing the loss of approval. You stop fearing solitude. In that freedom, you discover that respect is not a prize others give you. It is the reflection of your own self-worth. And once you carry that within, you no longer beg for acceptance. You no longer shrink. You no longer apologize for existing. You simply stand, and in that standing, others cannot help but notice. This is why the real revolution is not outward. It is not about changing the way the world sees you. It is about changing the way you see yourself. When you stop valuing yourself through the fragile mirror of others' opinions, you begin to recognize the power you always carried. You realize that your scars are not marks of shame, but symbols of survival. You see that your solitude is not emptiness, but strength. You understand that your boundaries are not walls, but doors through which only the worthy may enter. This is the quiet shift that reshapes everything, not because the world changes, but because you are no longer controlled by it. And in that shift, you are reborn, not as someone desperate to be liked, but as someone who commands respect simply by existing authentically. Authenticity. The world may not celebrate this transformation. In fact, it may resist it. People may call you distant, cold, or difficult when you stop bending to please them. But these are the words of those who thrived when you had no boundaries. Let them go. Respect is not about being universally loved. It is about being undeniable. And once you awaken to your worth, you become undeniable. Even those who dislike you cannot ignore you. Even those who speak against you cannot erase the impression you leave. That is the dark power of respect. It does not need approval. It does not beg for acceptance. It does not fade in silence. It lingers. It anchors. It endures. And when you carry it, you carry a strength that no one can strip away. So stop chasing the fragile comfort of being liked. Stop starving for approval in a world obsessed with surfaces. Choose instead the harder, lonelier, but infinitely more powerful path. Live in a way that demands respect. This does not mean domination nor cruelty. It means authenticity. It means standing firm in your truth, even if it costs you affection. It means valuing your inner revolution above outward validation, because the revolution that truly matters is not fought in the world outside. It is fought in the silence of your own soul. And when you win that war, you discover the deepest freedom a human being can ever know, the freedom of self-respect. Walk into that freedom without apology, without fear, without hesitation, for in the end being liked fades, but respect is eternal.